It's about history. It's about preservation. It's about sense of place here on Eastern Long Island. With Esperanza Leon, I'm Erwin Levy, and this is Our Hamptons. Esperanza.
Hello, Erwin.
You know, here it is. We've had such a winning formula since we began Our Hamptons. So much so that I was actually thinking of doing an IPO and going public because our formula is so good. And here we are deviating from, something that's successful. But I think this first initial guest at Our Hamptons is worth it, don't you?
Yes, it was time to mix it up, and this guest is going to be a fun mixing up.
And this particular guest, this is like an old game show we're doing right now, as if like we're all of this buildup. But this particular guest is certainly like-minded. Anyone that's following Our Hamptons, and a lot of the people that follow Our Hamptons follow our special guest. So why don't we, without further ado, bring in the founder of In Kind East Hampton and our friend, Jaine Mehring. Hi, Jaine.
Hello, Erwin.
Hi, Jaine.
Hi, Esperanza. I'm flattered and excited to be your first guest because I am a super fan of Our Hamptons podcast.
Well,
I can't take it. It's like so... I'm verklempt.
Esperanza, we don't really let anyone that's not a super fan of Our Hamptons into the Our Hamptons
well,
studios.
Gee, no, why would we? No.
Exactly. But no, Jaine, we really are serious, but excited to have you here. And really, yes, we're excited to have you here because, you are like-minded. I mean, if you listen to the opening of Our Hamptons, we're about history, we're about preservation, we're about sense of place. And I guess that's, hey, Esperanza, I did the segue. I think that's really a good place to start. Because that's sort of what your mission is, isn't it, Jaine?
It is. Needless to say, I have East Hampton in the name of my organization. So I am very focused on East Hampton, the town of East Hampton. And when we sort of get in a little more to the mission and mandate and my objectives, right, it is about how, in my mind, we develop our land and we use our land, and how that protects, but also enhances our sense of place in East Hampton. And there's historic preservation. There's all other things, sort of tied into that.
Exactly. Esperanza and I always often talk about this. A lot of what we talk about on Our Hamptons tends to be 6 degrees, 7 degrees of separation. I mean, they're really, yes, a lot of things are linked, right, Esperanza? Would you agree?
Absolutely. And I'm looking at this quote that you have on your website, actually, and I'm thinking how important, all of this conversation and this initiative that you have taken, it is about community, right? Mm-hmm. And so this quote says, when we see land as a community to which we belong, we may begin to use it with love and respect.
Right. That's the Aldo Leopold quote, right?
Yes, exactly. Aldo Leopold. And I just think that is such an apt quote to use. And also, I think Erwin and I, with these conversations that we have, are really centered around community and how important that is to us. So it's amazing to draw that parallel of seeing land as being so integral to community.
Right. What we build on it, how we landscape it, what we extract from it, what we take away from it, and how what we do lines up with and is compatible. And I don't necessarily mean the architecture is lockstep, with what's happening, but how it's compatible and all the individual pieces create a whole.
Yes.
And maybe we'll get in and talk about, ownership rights and things like that, and, how those are balanced by the rights of others and the community, and a stewardship, responsibility.
Right. It's my favorite, phrase. It's for the greater good.
Right.
Esperanza, she's a segueer also.
I'm a segue.
She's a segueer also, because we definitely are going to get into, a lot of those topics, and I happen to love the Aldo Leopold quote also, and Esperanza, I think, suffice to say, Building Kind's motto could also even be William Pickens of Sag Harbor Hills of Sam's,
Exactly.
right?
Yes.
It's about
Community,
not commodity. And I will tell you, Jaine, now I love your mission, and I'm blown away. I've always known about it. We follow each other on Instagram, and I read a lot of your posts, and I've been to your website. But in preparing today, I spent a little more time on your website than I did, and I know Esperanza did as well. It is incredibly impressive body of work already. I mean, like these things, and I just even love. Esperanza, Jaine talks about the definition of building kind, and if we really wanted to break that down, Jaine, it's really replace it with an appropriate footprint. I mean, if I wanted to sum it up in 4 words, isn't that sort of what the mantra is?
Well, yeah, I mean, the term building kind is sort of a standard term that's used within permitting, building permits. And a building kind is to, you might knock it down, but you are replacing it basically in the footprint, and sort of a like for like. It's a much more low impact way of developing, but I'm taking some poetic license, with the phrase, and it's the kind part is a bit of a double entendre, right?
Of course.
In terms
Of
of how we're
course.
kind to each other and to land and ecosystems and our resources.
Now, is it? Now we know you live in Beach Hampton, and you'll probably get into this as we move along. Is that what led you to this, to where you are now, Jaine? Like just seeing the development. I mean, why don't you give our audience a background to it, if that's an appropriate place to get
Yeah,
into
definitely. I mean, even when this all started, right? Yeah, because I'm very curious to know what happened to trigger this, but also when building kind actually came into being.
It is. The journey started a little bit earlier. It kind of like started when I got my dog. And, she was a hound, and she likes to sniff and she likes to explore. So I started taking her all over town. We'd go to different neighborhoods, we'd go to different trails. And, over the last 5 years, every time I walked into a neighborhood or onto a street, I was seeing the same thing again and again, right? Houses were being demolished, new things were going up that, were of a scope and scale that seemed so out of context and out of proportion. And I was sort of, wow, this is happening all over. And then living in Amagansett, before I even get close to home in Beach Hampton, what's happening in the lanes of Amagansett, those 4 beautiful, used to be low-key rural-ish roads that connect our 2 historic districts in Amagansett, basically being ravaged by significantly, extensively large redevelopment. And yes, then within Beach Hampton, which is a place that I've been connected to since I was a teenager and love dearly, now we're really starting to see the pressures kick in down here. And really the thing that put me over the edge was right at the end of my block, a beautiful old building called the Pink Houses, which were built in 1940. Some of the first structures in Beach Hampton were demolished to be redeveloped. And a house of monolithic aspect and proportion was built right at the end of my block. And that's that moment where I started asking the question that many other people do, which is, how does this happen? How do these things get built? Who allows these things to happen? And that really kicked me. Before I started Building Kind, I spent about a year in COVID watching every meeting possible. I watched zoning board meetings and ARB meetings, and see, I knew you Esperanza before you
Before we even met.
right, yeah. And town board meetings, and I started reading code, and I really spent a year just trying to educate myself to understand. And then finally, what I realized, to get to the meat of how I started building Kind, I couldn't just keep walking around, mumbling to myself, I can't believe this is happening, and feeling frustrated. And, I did what you've done, and so many other community groups have done, and just say, I need to take some action. I need to find a way to channel this frustration, this sort of sense of loss and grief in a way, and put it into, all right, how do we make change? What kind of change is possible to make?
And you mentioned also the other groups, even this is a mission of the like-minded. Jaine and I and Esperanza, we batter that term around a lot, and it's the meetings of the like-minded, but it really is true. You're talking about Amagansett Lanes, Esperanza. If you recall our first episode, way back when, Poseyville and Handy Lane, which is one of the most glaring examples of everything Jaine is talking about. And Jaine, reading your website, there are two words you bring up here, especially when we get into that whole 6 pillars that you talk of, about zoning and mindset. And those really are the two buzzwords. Esperanza and I, on our Hamptons, I guess we can substitute or interchange mindset with respect, because that's really so much of what's going on here, because we share your frustration. And I guess, Esperanza, would you say for us, this is sort of an outlet for us?
You mean, what is an outlet? I'm sorry.
An outlet, in other words, like the
podcast. Absolutely. Yeah. Right. I think that is exactly as Jaine just said. It's our way of dealing with, as you called it, a sense of grief of what's being lost, of what's changing, especially in the last 5 to 10 years in particular, and then in the last 2 to 3 years, it's been astronomical.
And Jaine, I don't want you to, and I don't, and I put this, I have a little note I made to myself here in bold letters. I didn't even share this with Esperanza, but I'm going to put it out there, not even necessarily to get into totally, right now, but it's something I've been thinking about. And I think Esperanza and I might have touched on it, periodically. Is it too late? Are we, yes, this is great work that you are doing, and a lot of people are doing, and there are other like-minded organizations that are starting to get angry and starting to address this. But that's a consideration. Or are we too late?
Yeah. Are we past the point of no return? And I would say, just before you answer that, Jaine, I mean, also, I think, we're talking about other, if you want to call it, activists in the community who are dealing with not only these developments that are structures that are being built, replacing historic ones or replacing smaller ones. It's also how we are dealing with our environment. And that's part of what you are talking about also with Build in Kind, extensive lawns, the ornamentals everywhere, how we can deal with that. And those are the activists that are coming out as well.
Yeah. And I want to come back to the point on the like-minded ness, and again, the purpose. And your question was important, Erwin. Like, this is an outlet. It is a way of, like, okay, how am I channeling my own, energies, but it's also, the key thing I want to stress is that we can't all just, even as we're like-minded, we tend to just talk amongst ourselves,
right?
Or we post on Facebook.
Yeah.
The sole purpose, the key purpose of Building Kind is to engage other like-minded people, to engage and educate citizens that I know are feeling the same thing, but rather than talk amongst ourselves, right, horizontally, we all need to be talking vertically. And by that, I mean, we need to be communicating to our board, our town board, with respect to the code and what changes can be made. And also, individually when we can, as members of the public, weigh in with the different zoning board, ARB. I mean, ARB doesn't really take public comment, right? The planning board. So I just want to, for people listening, right, the goal is that people, it can't just be you and me and a few other people who say it. The way things work, the way politicians, work, they have to hear it broadly, these concerns across the public. And that's really part of what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to educate, engage, and then teach people, like, you have to speak up too, because otherwise this is going to be a very hard issue to tackle. And to your point, I would like to say we're not too far gone, but we're pretty far gone, and time is of the essence. If we're going to change zoning code, it can't be a 5-year study,
Right. Yeah.
like
No.
turning it over and focus grouping and consultants, right? This is something that really needs to happen in the next 6 months, 6 to 12 months.
And to your point, Jaine, you're right. We agree. Preaching to the choir is easy. It's a great vent session. Hey, let's sit around and have a beer and just we keep it clean in our Hampton.
Or stand in the parking lot.
I'm not going to say blank and moan. I'm going to say vent and gripe, because we keep it clean on our Hamptons. But I love your 6 pillars, and it's something Esperanza started to get into a little bit, and I want to add to that, because it's so much of. There are just so many issues that boil down, and zoning is really a meaty topic. I mean, you could do a mini series on zoning, but I want to almost focus more, rather than getting into the nuts and bolts of zoning, on the mindset, because this is a subject Esperanza and I really dwell on. We've all seen the ad, and this was in Esperanza's backyard in Wainscott, of the 17-bedroom, 15-bath house on Hollow Road. Who needs that? That's a question I'll never figure out. And Jaine, looking on your website, and especially in your work of art blog post, which, by the way, was a work of art. My gosh, it was a thing of beauty. But reading and the way you dissected, and I think this is a place I'd like to go, the way you dissected that ad for 472 Further Lane, which, to your point, this is not down some quarter-mile driveway. This was the intersection of Further Lane and Indian Wells Highway, which is my route to the ocean from Springs. And if 12,000 square feet isn't enough, you can build 20, not to mention the below grade. Hey, Esperanza, amenities.
It's just painful, the babble. Oof.
Can we say it properly? It's amenities.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I Jaine, we're from Queens. We don't really know much about amenities. We don't need amenities, but okay. Anyway, but that kind of thing, and you really broke that down well. How you read some of these real estate ads, and that specific one wasn't an exception. That was a rule. That's how they all read. They extol, and you said it, you put it out so beautifully on this. They extol the virtues of the land and the beauty of the land, and then the ability to clear the land.
Yeah, the ability to completely devastate and destroy it. Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
right. I mean, Esperanza, what are we missing here?
I don't understand it either. I can't wrap my brain around the people writing this, and I understand it's an advertisement, so they're trying to sell something, but can't you just sell it cleanly and say, this is the most beautiful corner lot on, and it just describe it, the historic place, just needs to maybe have some upgrades to make it 21st century living.
Right. And again, it gets
why is everything a demolition derby?
And why is it, and what is this? And again, I mean, this is not, I mean, I don't want to, this is the psychology of it, but this mindset, to use Jaine's word, or the respect, there's such a lack of respect with the housing, with building a structure that impacts your neighbors, which is one of your other pillars, Jaine, how a towering house impacts.
Right. So, the mindset is changing And but there's something very specific and tangible as a dynamic that is happening, that is forcing this change of mindset. And that is, and I don't have the exact numbers, and I'm not going to geek out here with data, that's for another time, but over the last 5 years, and the reason this feels like it's accelerating is because there's been an intense incursion. Building primarily now is done by speculative investors.
Yes.
Some of them are here, some of them are away. So what's happened is all the buying of land and the redevelopment of it is meant for those individuals, the builder, the developer, and the real estate brokers that they are partnering with to maximize their profit and extract it for themselves in as fast a time as possible. And so respect is not on their mind because it's just a financial transaction to be in and out, maximized as fast as possible. And so that's why they're clearing everything. They're building as big as they can, corner to corner, up and down and below, right? Everything, because every square inch in their mind increases the potential to sell it for an even bigger process. And that is infecting the real estate community and those ads and the overall mindset. And so they don't think about neighbors. That's not in their algorithm.
But Jaine, I have a question here. Esperanza, I'm sorry. Did I?
No,
okay,
not at
Jaine,
all. Go ahead.
now I'm not going to play devil's advocate, but I'm going to play devil's advocate for 1 second. I lived up island in Great Neck, which is a place that had not the development pressures that this one does, but similar. And I had a friend of mine who was a small builder, not a large scale, really bought a piece of property, developed it, and then went on to the next. And we used to have this argument 20 years ago. And the question was, why are you building these houses so big? And he used to say this line to me all the time, Erwin, if they wanted 1,800 square feet, that's what I'd build them. No one wants that. So and I guess the point of that whole is about the mindset. I guess we can't change the mindset of a spec builder. He's got no connection. He or she has no connection to this community. So
right. But your point is that the mindset is big house living, whether it's your first, your primary home or your second or third home or whatever it is, it has to be
look at
3,000 square feet and up, a monument to yourself.
Look at me. Look at what I've achieved.
Yes. Yeah.
And the hell with Poseyville, the hell with whomever.
Right. You guys know this, the American mindset around houses has always been extraordinary relative to everywhere else on the globe, right? You can go back 50 years, 40 years, 30 years, and you can see, the average US house size is like 3 or 4 times what it is, in other developed economies, right? And so it's all shifting up. Needless to say, there's been enormous amounts of wealth creation and concentration of capital that's feeding into it. But there's also research that shows that decisions about how big to build and property values are not absolute based. It's about relative size. And so that's why this feels like it's accelerating because, we went from 3,500 square foot houses being the average new builds, and then they went to 5,000, and now they went to 6,000, and now there's a whole slew of 12, 15, 18,000 square feet. So it's this it is a competition. It is very much the conspicuous consumption, but at such an
on steroids,
level. And unfortunately, our code, I'm not going to get into code, but code hasn't really changed that much in 20 years in terms of the dimensions that are allowed. But to your point, Erwin, until more recently, people didn't even come close to building the maximum allowables because the mindset was different, because it was people who maybe had owned land for a long time or knew the community well or thought about the breeze and the trees, right? And it's ironic because we're in a period of climate emergency and sensitivity, and yet, you know, the impact of building on all sustainability, climate, energy consumption is so extraordinary now, even though people are more sensitive about it.
Yeah,
Are they really though? I would ask that.
Well,
Right? Because I always make not the joke, it's the observation of a person in a very large house with a pool and all the amenities, and they use the towels by the pool. They just drop them and they, keep using them throughout the day. And someone picks them up and keeps washing them throughout the day. And there's a lot of consumption there as far as water, and there's, detergents going into the water and so forth, and electricity, blah, 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 blah. But I am sure they're using seventh generation soap,
Right,
and so they think they're doing their part.
And driving Teslas,
And drive, yes,
Right.
exactly. Like,
It's a
so,
great thing,
that's
but
my contribution, but the mindset really requires a huge shift. And how, to me, I think you're totally right about taking these points to the public realm, of taking them to the town board and to the politicians and the agencies that that work with the zoning laws and so forth. But I'm also of the mind that I just, whenever I can, when I can, I'm speaking individually to people, because it is amazing actually that it's like people are on autopilot and they don't even realize that what they're doing, or that a future action that they might take, is going to be detrimental to our community. And I take those opportunities. I think that's part, like, there's a grassroots side of this. I think you are doing that as well, but I think that has to be something that our government has to also do much more intensely.
I mean, changing hearts and minds. I mean, you will do it, I'll do it, I'll write about it, I'll talk about it, but it's a painstaking process. And the issue is that a lot of the mindsets belong to a lot of people who might be here 20 days a year.
Exactly.
Or not here, or you deal a lot with gates and fences when you're on the architectural review board, and we look at those things from the outside, but what's happened is people are literally fencing themselves inside their compounds, and they don't even know they have neighbors, even though they're right.
There's a total isolation component here, which goes to the point of what we were talking about at the start about community, because the more people isolate themselves in their big homes with these 17 bedrooms or whatever it is, where, you need, like, they're texting each other probably between rooms. I don't know. Like, there's an intercom. I can't figure it out. Walkie-talkies.
Honing pigeons. I mean, it's so
I
far on
don't
the
know.
other side of the
Smoke
house.
signals. I can't figure it out. But, I find that's isolating, because if you have, but they have a great room. But still, it's like there's all these rooms that they have to escape to, and everybody's isolated in their rooms. And then on top of that, they have yards where they're isolating themselves from their neighbors and from, the prying eyes of anybody who's out.
Well, I mean, this is and Esperanza and I have often said how one day we have to have an episode of Our Hamptons about pet peeves. But one of my biggest pet peeves, and this goes right into mindset, right into everything else, is the screening. Because, and Jaine, you mentioned this on your website, in the 6 pillars section, how when this mindset of screening, and this is what to extend Esperanza's point, you're screening yourself in, but you're not only screening yourself in, you're sort of neighbors be damned. I'm blocking your view shed. I'm blocking the view. I'm blocking the vista that was here for so many years for everyone walking by, biking by, or driving by, because I want to screen myself in. It does get back to mindset and respect in such a big way, as does the proliferation of lawns. And to this point, we're talking about all of these things with government and everything else. How about if a landscaper hired by one of these people in a place like Beach Hampton would just say, no, I'm not putting a lawn there. No, I'm not putting up island landscape on a dune. How
Right.
about
I mean,
that?
we're a little lucky in Beach Hampton because the fragility of our wetlands and dune lands means that a lot of anything that is going to get expanded or redeveloped does have to go to the zoning board for special review, for special natural resources permits. And now that board is being very specific about saying no sod lawn, no ornamentals, irrigation only here. The point is what happens once the thing is built, and then the landscaping company comes in. It's that drip 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 that or clip clip clip, right,
Yeah, yeah,
of
yeah,
of
yeah.
the plantings. It's too big, to back to your question, are we too far gone? We're too big to be able to fully rein in all these different people that tend to properties, that build them, that upkeep them, that landscape them, that irrigate them. And that is a huge challenge for helping to rein this back in. Which is why I keep coming back to this very tangible goal of people aren't necessarily going to opt back into being great stewards of their land. And so, unfortunately, the code has to change, because the point of zoning code is its sole purpose is to balance the interests of neighbors and community with the private landowning rights of an individual.
Yeah.
And we just have to move, we're going to have to, I believe, change those allowances to bring more, I'm going to call it, balance back to development. And also, it's not a matter of my opinion or yours. It's right there in the comprehensive plan and, and different parts of the code that says it is the responsibility of the town board to protect the rural character of the
And
community.
and
Exactly.
Jaine, I'm gonna hold it right there for a minute, because I think this is a Jaine Mehring segue, Esperanza, but we're gonna use
Yes, it was a
we're
perfect
gonna
one.
use it, and it's a good one because we
She's
want to start
cute.
wrapping this up. And we do want to focus on a community that has been doing something about it. We only have a few minutes left. So I just want to touch base on this. And this is a project between the Wainscott Heritage Project and Build in Kind. And I want to spend a couple of minutes about this. So Jaine, Esperanza, why don't we talk about this film that's going to be coming on October 8th at the LTV studios, and the incentive behind it, the storyline behind it. So Jaine, I'm going to turn it over to you and Esperanza to go
Yeah,
over.
and I'll let, I mean, Jaine, you can lead the way on this because you brought it to my attention, and I just immediately, brought it to our group with Wainscott Heritage Project, and we just immediately said, this is something that we need to do. So take it away, because this film is phenomenal, and I can't wait for October 8th.
So the film is called One Big Home, and the film was actually released in 2013, so it's been a while. And in brief, it's the story of one town on Martha's Vineyard, where one person who was a carpenter who was working on homes that he was seeing were getting bigger and bigger, and it bothered him. He was concerned, even though he was making a lot of money, off of being a part, right? His name is Thomas Benna, and he made a film. It's 12 years in the making, and it is about how he engaged the whole community. And there's a lot of controversy over what should be done and how it should be done. But I won't give away the ending, but how the community built a consensus through debate and discussion and a long process, and did make changes to their bylaws and their codes to put pretty specific and significant caps on house size. And I watched the film when I was first kind of coming up to speed on stuff. I think it was 2020. And it was very influential for me. And I reached out to Thomas to tell him I'm just trying to do this in East Hampton. And he's been incredibly supportive of what we're doing. But importantly, very quickly, this film has been screened in other places. And it's been so powerful to these communities that it's inspired them to kick off their own initiatives. Every community has to do what's right for their own community. And we have a lot of similarities to Martha's Vineyard. We're also very different.
But it's important to note that it is, we're not talking about a suburban environment. We're talking about a resort-based economy. This is analogous to our own community. So
correct.
It's a point, and I think the point that has to be made here that I'm going to make strenuously it is something can be done. And we only have a few minutes left, and I really want to let our audience know, Jaine and Esperanza, when and where is this event going to be taking place? And we're going to be promoting this and posting this on our Instagram page, and I'm sure Jaine is as well. But Esperanza, this is going to be at the LTV Studios, right?
That's correct. Yes. So LTV Studios, which is our local public access station. It's really a terrific place. And Michael Clark is the director there, has been doing a lot of great new things. And it's going to be Saturday, October 8th. We'll have the screening of One Big Home. And then it's going to be followed by a panel discussion and Q&A with the filmmaker, Thomas Benna. He'll be zoomed in with some special guests accompanying him, and more details to be determined. But that's going to be 4 p.m. Saturday, October 8th, brought to you by Build In Kind East Hampton and Wainscott Heritage Project.
That is really fun. I'm going to have to get a Zoom link because I'm actually not going to be here.
Won't be the same without
you get committed to a something like this, and the schedules never jive. But Jaine Mehring, Build In Kind East Hampton, please follow her on Instagram. Like Wainscott Heritage Project, it is an education in every single post. Esperanza, we may have to invite Jaine back.
I think so. I'm feeling that same thing.
I'm feeling that also. We don't like to go on and on forever on these episodes. We try to keep them somewhat concise, but I do want to wrap up with thanking Jaine so much for her time today, and hopefully we're going to bring her back.
Thank you.
Esperanza, as always, a pleasure.
A pleasure. Thank you so much, Jaine, and for all you do
my
in
friends.
our community.
I'm so excited to be able to engage with you, the like-minded. And again, none of us are sitting here saying it's over, right? We are going to be
we are all in, Jaine.
About what we can do.
We are all in.
Devotees. And this is the Mutual Admiration Club. So
yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of both of you.
I'm a huge fan. I told you I'm a super fan.
She is a super fan. She's following us, Esperanza. She really is. She's the real deal. Thank you,
all
Jaine.
Right.
Thanks,
Thank
Esperanza.
you so much.
Thank you, Erwin. Thank you, Esperanza. What a treat. What a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. New episodes of Our Hamptons are released every other Tuesday. Find them wherever you get your podcasts.